And we're happy to welcome back to our studio Antoni Cimolino, the General Director of the Stratford Shakespeare Festival. Great to have you back in that chair.
Good to see you, Stephen.
We are actually not going to talk too much about Stratford right now, and we're actually going to talk about a very small place in Central America, because Stratford is in El Salvador. What is the festival doing in El Salvador?
Well, I asked myself that question a couple of years ago.
I bet you do.
About 4 or 5 years ago, a CUSO representative, the Canadian University Student Organization, came to us and said, look, there is a community in El Salvador which is very beautiful. It, like Stratford, is about an hour and a half outside of a major city. It has a lake, and it has an artistic community. And the possibility is there that it could be developed, and developed economically, by having more theater and music concerts. Would you be able to help them? So I went down there. Since that time, we've had many, many volunteers from the festival go down there. We just had 10 people down there in the last 2 months.
How do you get there?
Well, you can take a series of flights, or you can take a direct flight through...
Let's just actually, while you're in the middle of this answer,
Yeah.
Michael, if you would, put the map up, because this place is, I don't want to say it's in the middle of nowhere, but I think it's probably hard to get to. Here's Suchitoto, is that how you say it?
Yes, and there is a great flight from TACA Airlines, T-A-C-A. It's direct from Toronto, and you can get down there. Now, it's a complicated landscape, socially, politically. They had a civil war that lasted from 1980 through to 92. And in that time, there was a very large divide in the country. I think that, there were some elements in the United States that felt that El Salvador was the forefront of a series of Cuban-style revolutions that would lead to, communism. I think for most people who were involved in that struggle, and that I've had the good fortune to meet many of these people who had been guerrillas, they were simply trying to fight for survival and bread in a system that was, it was feudal. I mean, people didn't own land.
Feudal as in F-E-U-D-A-L. Maybe futile as well.
No, but feudal in the sense of they were working on large estates, mostly coffee estates. They never owned their own land. It was a very, very poor and difficult environment, and it still is in many ways. So our volunteers who go down there, who work with young people, who train and pass on skills, who support both professional and amateur young people's productions, learn so much. They come back incredibly energized by this work.
Okay, so CUSO gave you the idea originally to do something, but they're not theater people, you're the theater person.
Right.
So they said, we'd love to have you down here. You've got to come down, you've got to suss it out, and then you decide to do what?
Well, we went down there, and I began to realize, yes, there are real possibilities here. Stratford in the early 50s was this great, incredible genesis of arts and culture that spread across Canada. We had music festivals, we had opera and movies, and we were started for economic reasons. I mean, we saved the town in a way in the 50s, because the steam engines, which were repaired in Stratford, that plant was going to close down, putting 2,000 people out of work in a town of 18,000. So it was the arts that created the jobs. And once the arts were there, then all of a sudden other factories wanted to come, and smart new technologies began to move in, because they could attract great people to come to this wonderful community. So we were started for economic reasons. Was there a possibility that the same could happen there? But Steve, you know what I discovered? I went down there, and I met a nun from New Jersey, Sister Peggy O'Neill, okay? And she's in her 70s.
Sounds like the beginning of a joke.
Oh, well, we were having dirty martinis together down there. I've never had those before. They're disgusting. Okay. So she had stayed in the country during the Civil War, and I think, as a lot of people know, the Jesuits, the nuns, were killed during that time, right? She stayed throughout that period. There was the best girls' school in the country was in this little town, and it was for orphan girls. And they would receive an extraordinary education from these American nuns, who sadly had to leave as the violence took hold. She said to me that the great privilege during the course of the Civil War was the ability to bury the dead. Because if you were a guerrilla and you were killed, a young man or young woman, if your family showed up, it was a death sentence. And 70,000 people went missing during the course of that war, were killed. So she remembers getting calls. She remembers going and picking up a severed head and bringing it back to the church and giving it mass and a burial. So I immediately, I thought of Antigone and Sophocles, where the great crime in this Greek play is that they don't allow the bodies to be buried. And this is a crime against humanity and the gods. And I thought, you know, we do these plays, but to some degree, for actors in a Western democracy, to some degree, these are always abstractions that you have to use your imagination. Here, 4 hours away by flight, these people this is no abstraction. This is what they have within living memory. As a matter of fact, the student production we just did of this great classic play called Fuente o Vauna, which I won't tell you about, but it's a great play about human rights, written in 1610, about a real incident that happened in Spain. The students did this in modern dress. And the violence, normally, you know, drama and violence, it's what we, you know, like because it's just so tasty. But in this case, it had to be dialed back because people had seen torture, real torture.
They've seen the real thing.
They
didn't need to see it on stage.
Exactly. It spoke to them.
It's funny, you said when you were holding the skull, I thought, alas, poor Yorick, I knew him well. There was another one. There we go.
That's right. And of course, Shakespeare's audience would have seen heads on poles, right?
Right.
From political killings, from... So we gain much more than we give. We're very fortunate. I'm going to give some plugs. Power Corporation, Scotiabank have been very generous. Our volunteers give their time. They go down to there for months without pay, with support from CUSO to help them with daily rations. But they gain so much when they come back. And when you speak to these young people, they're so impressive. You know, we provide a meal for them during the course of the day. Sometimes that's the only food these kids get during the course of the day. Many of them are from broken homes because of what's going on in the society.
Here's the tale of the tape. Let me give some of the numbers, because economically speaking, Suchitoto looks like a very poor place. Population, a little less than 18,000. The unemployment rate is 66%. Average income, $146 Canadian a month. Average cost of living is well above that. Now, there are some similarities, you talked about this earlier, between Suchitoto today and Stratford of 60 years ago. The population is about the same. The unemployment rate certainly is not the same. 66% is even well beyond what it would have been there. So how realistic is it to apply Stratford's formula for success from 60 years ago to this place of today?
Look, what I learned is that the situation is much, much more complex than I ever imagined. I also learned that the benefits from this program are much more numerous than I'd ever imagined. Yes, the economic issue is going to be tough. I mean, we're trying to create support for a performing arts center where visitors from across Central America would come and visit. This town is gorgeous. It's on a volcanic mountain and it's beautiful, and people do visit from elsewhere. So the possibilities are there. The best hotel in the whole country is in that little town. So the infrastructure is there. So it's not impossible. But the culture is different. You know, the country's very poor. They're not used to paying for theater. So there's going to need to be a lot of work done in terms of this development. But what I also discovered, Stephen, is that the benefits for young people are enormous. I mean, there are people now, as they learn to put on these plays and be part of it, who gain confidence, who are starting to read when they've had no use for reading before. Now they're picking up scripts and wanting to do what the professional actors from El Salvador are doing and do it with them. They have a sense of pride. They're getting positive reinforcement, or often they don't get any. And in this country, the gangs are rampant. I mean, there are many gangs there. And I had a meeting with a special unit of the president's office who was wanting more help. They want to set up 120 such centers across the country to engage youth, because, of course, art is a civilizing force. It's absolutely the opposite of a gang mentality. So the possibility there isn't just about economic development. It's about giving hope to young people and opportunity.
You quoted Sister Peggy O'Neill from New Jersey earlier.
Yes.
And now it's my turn. We have some tape. This is from a documentary about the production process of the Suchitoto Stratford Theater. And, well, it's available on YouTube. Anybody can see it. Here's a snippet. Michael, roll tape, please.
We really want not only to build a culture, but we want to save our young people from the violence that has taken over El Salvador. We are the most violent country in the Americas. We have had more recruitment of gang members from outside Suchitoto, and it is hard for our young people to resist.
How do you focus the community's attention on forming, of all things, a theater group with all that violence surrounding them so often?
It's not easy, it's complex. We have these young people who we are working with in training. They just did a series of performances. 4 of them had been stopped by the police and roughed up very severely. I think the police thought they were gang members. So we made sure the chief of police for the town was there at the performance. And he had a wonderful time, and we're beginning to, as time goes on, work more closely with the community so that there's more understanding. But it's very complex. There were 7 young people killed in this community about 13 months ago. And
young people meaning?
People who are 16, 17 years of age, shot in one spot. So it's, you know, there's still the divide between right and left. They've just had an election about a year ago where they elected a left-wing government, which was a big step forward, and that seems to have been absorbed and respected by the whole country. The mayor of the town said after one of the first performances that we did, he said, you see that parent over there and you see that parent over there that are talking? Those people have not spoken since 1992, and they're speaking now because their kids are together in a play. So,
should we do the Shakespeare again? The Montagues and the Capulets? There we go. It's everywhere, isn't it?
You know what? The story of this country is the story of Romeo and Juliet. The division, the pain, the beauty, and also killing their own children.
10 years from now, if things go the way you hope they do, what are we going to see there?
Well, we will see an arts center that trains young people from throughout the 5 areas, the 5 countries that are there. We will see regular performances, and people will travel there and they'll stay in hotels and eat at the restaurants and support the work of these young people. We will see the artists of El Salvador have a place where their voice can be heard, where their work can be properly presented in conditions that they would like to see. So there's a possibility for the artistic life, the civil life, and the economic life of the country.
It's all in Spanish, I presume, right?
Yes, oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
And so we constantly, our first project was a play written by the young people themselves about indigenous legends in Spanish. We do Spanish classics, and Central American writers.
¿Se habla español?
No.
Me neither. We got to work on it. You just heard all my Spanish. Any plans to adopt this model and take it somewhere else?
You know, there's been some very good work done around the world. I'm finding out more and more with regard to economic development and especially helping people express themselves through the arts. And when the government in El Salvador said, can you help us and set up, over 100 more of these places, I realized what we have to do is concentrate on this one project and make it work. And so no, the answer is we're going to stick to our knitting.
Gotcha. I want to talk about what you've done down there and what kind of an impact it has on what you're doing up here. Because you've got the Grapes of Wrath coming out next season.
Yes, we're doing, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So, the issues in the Grapes of Wrath, you tell me if this is a stretch, but obviously Grapes of Wrath is about the dirty 30s and this, Tom Joad and his family and what misery and poverty they had to live in and go through.
Right.
I'm not sure they had the gang warfare that they have in El Salvador today, but I'm guessing that some of what went on down there will influence the way you will mount and direct this play up here. Am I right?
Yes.
How so?
Well, that experience had a profound impact on me. I mean, to see the kind of poverty I'm seeing there, but also to see the kind of strength and heroism and an ability to simply move forward. I mean, speaking to a farmer and his wife who, she gave birth to 3 children in the mountains as they fought during the course of the Civil War. I mean, the Grapes of Wrath, to some degree, is a story of a family that endures, that survives, that has insults to their dignity, that have insults to their body, that are like Lear, unaccommodated. They lose, they're forced out into the elements, but they manage to get through. And so what I've tried to do with the cast is not make this just a cultural, historical issue. I've shown them documentaries about El Salvador. I've also shown them, and we've had representatives in from migrant workers to talk about what is the situation for migrant workers in Canada today. What's the reality of poverty in Canada today? Because this isn't just a story about the dirty 30s. We've had our own recession.
For John Steinbeck, who of course wrote The Grapes of Wrath, this was an indictment. His story was an indictment on the rural poor in the United States and how appallingly they were being treated at the time. Admittedly, this is a very speculative question, but you got any thoughts about what he might think of what's going on in Suchitoto, El Salvador?
You know what really strikes me about this?
The reason I ask you is because I mean, you're the kind of guy, you're artistic enough, you can get in the head of these geniuses, right? Yeah. So that's why I'm wondering if you might have some insight on that.
Well, you know what, the situation that's common to today, to the Okies in 1930s, and to what happened in El Salvador, is that in order to treat other people badly, in order to allow other people to be treated badly, there has to be a narrative line which somehow excuses you. You know, if the person who is homeless is a drug addict and they're just going to use the money for drugs, or they're just going to use it for booze, then you can walk by in a 20-degree below zero night and not give them money. The Okies were seen as being stubbornly ignorant, as being willfully, dirty, incestuous, lazy. When I read that there are polls out that came out last week that say 25% of Canadians believe that the poor are lazy, I realize that we have constructed these narratives for ourselves, which say it's okay for this person to live that way because they deserve it, or they're defrauding the system, or that's how they want to live. That was true for the Okies. It was also true for what happened to the poor and the farmers. You know, they're communists. They don't have legitimate demands for food. The amount of money the American embassy spent the American government spent during the course of that 12-year civil war, they could have bought annuities for each one of those peasants. You know, they would all be very rich today. Instead, they spent it on bombs. So we somehow have to realize the humanity of all those people who are different from us and perhaps dirty, and you know, for the teachers in those schools in California, Stephen, those poor kids who came in with the migrant farmers were just, you know, they were bringers of disease. They were half asleep. I hope, you know, we have kids who are in the same boat in Canada. It's easy to think of them as the other.
Well, let me finish up on that. We got about a minute and a half here, and I'm wondering, you know, these plays are timeless. But you're, in essence, focused on a period that took place 80 years ago.
Right.
What do you want people to leave the theater thinking after they see your Grapes of Wrath?
I want them to realize that the courage that's there in the human spirit is phenomenal and it's moving, but that we also have a role in making sure that other people are taken care of. That this isn't just about heroism, it's also about our role. You know, George Bernard Shaw said a good drama is only as good as its antagonist. To what degree are we all of us, antagonists? To what degree are we allowing this to happen to poor people today? So it's a beautiful play, it's a touching play, it is also a political and social play, and I'd like our audiences to feel that and maybe behave a little bit differently the next day.
Understood. Antoni Cimolino, it's always good of you to visit us here at TVO. Thanks so much.
It's good to see you. Thank you.